The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
You're watching the 10th season of the Grenlec Debates. Please bear in mind that matches, topics, and positions are randomly selected by schools. The theme for the round of 16 is development. I am your chairperson, Eric Williams, and I call this House to order. The motion: be it resolved that it is feasible for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy. The proposition: Wesley College. The opposition: Presentation Brothers College. Please welcome the first speaker for the proposition.
Mr. Chairman, fellow debaters, judges, timekeepers, audience all, good morning. I stand here today to propose a motion that is crucial for the preservation and sustainability of planet Earth. Be it resolved that it is feasible for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy. Purpose by way of elaborating and defining, I am here as first speaker to lay bare the reasons why we are in full support of this moot. The second speaker on my team will enlighten you on how this can be done and highlight countries which are on their way to making this a reality. As we delved into issues surrounding the world's heavy reliance on non-renewable sources of energy and the reluctance of some persons to embrace the notion that it is feasible for small island states like Grenada to be solely dependent on renewable energy sources, we realized that it is key to have a clear understanding of the word feasible in this context. Permit me now to enable same. Merriam-Webster.com defines feasible as capable of being done or carried out, with synonyms such as suitable, proper, beneficial, and fitting. In other words, the moot is saying that it is proper and fitting for small island states to rely on renewable energy only. There is no denying that there are early financial implications which may make it a daunting task for many small island states, but such does reduce the substance of the moot. Here are some of the reasons why we on this side support the moot. 1. Fossil fuel dependence creates a financial and environmental burden for small islands. According to an article entitled Low Carbon Development Strategies for the Caribbean, retrieved from worldwatch.org, and I quote, "The nations of the Greater Antilles are among the Caribbean's highest consumers of energy. This dependence has resulted in enormous economic and environmental costs." End of quote. Right here in Grenada. According to Mr. John Ogis, Senior Energy Officer in the Ministry of Finance and Energy, Grenada spent $145,702,502 on petroleum products in 2016. How then can we deny the need to release small island states of the financial burden caused by the dependence on fossil fuel? 2. The need to stem global warming. In an article retrieved from cyen.org, dated 2011, and I quote, "In the Caribbean, the production of electricity by power companies consumes the largest amount of fossil fuel, making them the greatest contributors to global warming and climate change in the region." End of quote. I am sure you have seen the devastating effects of the 2 Category 5 hurricanes which splashed through this region in quick succession this year. Storms increasing in frequency and intensity with non-renewable energy sources as a major donor, and as predicted, it will only get worse. So when you take the total devastation off for the Caribbean, for our opponent to accept that it is feasible, proper for small island states to become solely dependent on renewable energy, I pray not. 3. Depleting reserves of non-renewable energy. According to an article retrieved from Stanford.com entitled Towards Sustainable Energy, and I quote, "In about 50 years, we will have depleted most of our fossil fuel reserves, so it is necessary to find alternative sources of energy before that happens." End of quote. So, Mr. Chairman, if energy reserves are running low, what do you think will happen? Russia and the Middle East, the world's largest gas and oil suppliers, will keep the reserves for themselves, and small islands will be left high and dry. In times of crisis, that's what farmers do. In local parlance, who don't produce, don't eat. 4. Proponents. What about the effects of non-renewable sources of energy on our health? According to an article retrieved from UCSUSA.org, and I quote, "Fossil fuel release toxic chemicals that pollute our air and water, and they have adverse and costly effects on public health." End of quote. So you see, attentive audience, this debate is really not about cost. In terms of priority, cost is weighed on the chain. And once this acceptance that renewable energy is a proper way to go, small island states will discover that by relooking their priorities and their budgetary allocations, much funding can become available to advance towards a most desirable outcome, being solely dependent on renewable energy. Thank you.
The first speaker for the opposition.
Good morning, all. We dismiss any definitions put forward by the proposition. My colleagues and I will not be vacillated by the vacuous expostulations of our aspirants. As for speaker, I will delineate the intricacies of the moot, making lucid our assent. My second speaker will further fortify our astute cogitation, accentuating the fallacious arguments of our proponents. Be it resolved that it is feasible for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy. According to Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, feasible is defined as being possible and practical, and to do easily or conveniently. The United Nations Conference on Environment and Development recognizes small island developing states as a distinct group of developing countries facing specific social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities. 3 geographical regions have been identified for the location of SIDS. They are the Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean, Mediterranean, and South China Sea, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. According to Macmillan Dictionary, solely is defined as involving nothing except the person or thing mentioned. Cambridge Advanced Dictionary defines dependent as needing the support of something or someone in order to continue existing or operating. Renewable energy, as defined by the International Energy Agency, refers to energy derived from the natural processes that are replenished constantly. The moot, seemingly facile in its face value, is rather profound in its essence. This moot categorically stating that it is possible and practical that SIDS depend only on, exclusively and completely on nothing but renewable energy. This unequivocally means any energy generated for the consumption in SIDS must be renewable energy. This means vehicles, fishing vessels, power supplies, agriculture, housing, and companies supplying electricity, such as our very own Grenlec, must supply 100% renewable energy, with no backup plan that requires the use of non-renewable energy. SIDS, by their very nature, tend to confront similar constraints in their sustainability development efforts, such as narrow resource-based depriving them of the benefits of economies of scale, small domestic markets, heavy dependence, and few external and remote markets, high cost for energy and transportation, long distance from export markets and import resources, low and irregular international traffic volumes, little resilience to natural disasters, high volatility of economic growth, limited opportunities for the private sector, and a proportionately large reliance of the economies in the public sector, and also a fragile natural environment. Based on these very characteristics, Honorable Chair, these set SIDS apart and makes it literally impossible for them to depend solely on renewable energy. Let us not be confuffled by the notion that 100% renewable energy electricity supply equates to being solely dependent on renewable energy. There are countries that boast of being 100% reliant on renewable energy, such as Borneo off the coast of Venezuela, and Costa Rica, that produces 100% electricity supply, still have backup plans that require the use of non-renewable energy. In addition, they still rely on fossil fuels to power their vehicles, their boats, their power supplies. This list is not exhaustive, making them not solely dependent on renewable energy. Let me make it clear. My team and I is not in any way against renewable energy. In fact, we appreciate the benefits that can be derived from it. And the issue at hand is whether or not that it is feasible to be solely dependent on renewable energy. Honorable judges, the answer is a categorical no. Thank you.
The second speaker for the proposition.
Good morning to all. We stand firm with our definition of feasible. As second speaker on the proposition, I rise to evidence the efforts being made by countries and companies, both large and small, to do the proper thing, and some of the viable strategies and many benefits to be enjoyed. I am confident that by the time that I am through, those who are not yet on our side will be joining with us to say that it is feasible, proper, fitting for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy. Esteemed judges, there is really too much evidence out there for us to allow our opponents to remain in oblivion. According to an article in the Financial Times dated July 14, 2017, Norway, a country whose wealth is based on fossil fuel, is now turning to renewable energy sources and has thus become the world leader in cars powered by electricity from such sources. Big Norway accepts that it is proper to turn to renewable energy sources, but when it comes to small island states, however, the naysayers may be shouting costs. But guess what? Closer to home, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean's top exporter of oil and gas, is also seeing the need to go to the route of renewable energy. And here is the crunch line. Falling oil prices is making it a viable alternative. So out goes the too costly phobia. Read all about it in an article dated April 9, 2009 on the website of the Global Energy Network Institute. Even our own Grenlec, though benefited immensely from the use of fossil fuel, is willing to trade a portion of immediate profits for a greener environment and the prospects of clients living longer. Grenlec is invested in the expensive electric cars to be ultimately powered from renewable energy sources. And the result? Great news. Based on his trial, Grenlec's corporate communications manager, Mrs. Prudence Greenwich, is reporting 50% saving on the energy costs associated with gas vehicles on comparable size. What's a bonus to put with a greener environment? Get the full story online on the newtoday.gd in an article entitled Grenlec owns 3 electric vehicles. Still worrying about subtle costs for small islands? Well, there are strategies which they can employ. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, August 2014, combination of political prioritization, open markets, technical planning, and capacity buildings are the catalyst for renewable energy investment inflows, and the small islands such as Cyprus and Samoa are recognized for that. Closer to home, Little Dominica is lauded for steps in that direction. In an article on CaribbeanNetNews.com dated April 26, 2006, Dr. Bayong from the Florida Solar Energy Center is referenced for saying, and I quote, "The pursuit of cleaner and environmentally friendly sources of energy is in keeping with government's aim of lessening the island's dependence on fossil fuel, while at the same time maintaining Dominica's reputation as the nature island of the world." In 2014, our dear country was rebranded as Pure Grenada, and yes, tourists crave such pristine environments away from the smog and soot in metropolitan areas. So if we are to truly be expected financial benefits from rebranding, it is fitting to get as close as we can to relying solely on renewable sources of energy. Please accept now that it is feasible, proper, fitting, and beneficial for small island states to rely solely on renewable energy. I rest my case. Don't let knowledge go to waste. Thank you.
The second speaker for the opposition.
Good morning, all. My proponents are very good in finding support for what they want to believe. But it is all too easy to fall into the myopic trap of assuming the only thing to see is what he happened to be looking for, as the famous psychologist Abraham Maslow observed, and I quote, "To the man who only has a hammer in the toolkit, every problem looks like a nail." End of quote. Honorable Chair, the climate change argument has been the engine fueling the renewable energy debate. Contrary to President Trump's belief, climate change is real and the consequences are catastrophic. The very nature of SIDS, small island developing states, make them susceptible to being ravaged by natural disasters. Imagine this. In September alone, the tropics experienced at least 4 Category 4 hurricanes, which almost crippled the entire region. Their environment is in its most unpredictable state. This heightens the dangers of environmental calamities. Being solely dependent on the fragile environments that SIDS are already victims to will only worsen our vulnerability. According to Professor Clive Thomas in his document, and I quote, "Macroeconomic adjustment growth and development in small, poor, open economies, end of quote. Open quote. A true measure of development is poverty alleviation, and the fundamental underpinning of this is sustainability, end of quote. It therefore means that investing in renewable energy must be sustainable in all facets. The UNDP has highlighted that small island developing states are plagued by poverty, low GDP, and heavy reliance on external markets. These characteristics make such an effort to solely depend on renewable energy as an impossible feat, thus rendering it not possible to be practically done easily or conveniently. What may be sustainable for large developed states may not necessarily be sustainable for small island developing states. A famous proverb states, and I quote, "No man is an island," end of quote. And this is figuratively true. No island is really just an island. States do not exist in isolation. Their geographic size and location lend itself to interconnectivity facilitated by globalization. This involves interaction, trade, and integration with the rest of the world. States are heavily reliant on the sectors that are bolstered by the external markets, such as tourism. Well, the opponents, in light of this, how are you exactly proposing that we refuel cruise ships that call to our shores or aircrafts that frequent our ports when they are all using fossil fuels? Are you suggesting that we use renewable energy? I think not. When we live in utopia, where we have no natural disasters, total alleviation of poverty, and islands have been closed economies, even then, I would not suggest it feasible for small island states to solely depend on renewable energy. I thank you.
The opposition cross-examiner.
My worthy opponent, your first speaker said that funding is available for renewable energy projects. However, Grenada is still struggling to raise $60 million to add to the $20 million we already raised in order to initiate our geothermal project. How then can you say that funding is available?
My opponent, as our Prime Minister stated, with all the investors we have lined up to invest in Grenada, why not get them to invest in some of this renewable energy? After all, it is something they can profit from.
My worthy opponent, you're not answering my question. We are still struggling to raise the $60 million, and we have been doing so for some time.
But my opponent, I just gave you something that you can do.
Next question. My first speaker spoke of the many constraints of small island states, including lack of resources, low GDP, and increased national debt. How then can SIDs, small island developing states, solely depend on renewable energy if it is so costly to start and also to maintain small island development?
My opponents, we know that it is costly, but if we make it a priority like everything else, we can get it done.
My worthy opponent, how then can it be feasible, as in being possible and practical to achieve easily?
My opponents, with the amount of money spent on fossil fuels annually, we can redirect some of that money into harnessing some sort of renewable energy.
My worthy opponent, these renewable energy plants that you speak of are very expensive. And then we even have to think about the maintenance cost and the hidden cost, such as Dominica are experiencing now, as we are vulnerable to natural disasters. What about when these renewable energy plants, we are struck by natural disasters? What will happen then?
My opponents, as my second speaker stated, one of the reasons why we have been devastated by these natural disasters is because of our high use of fossil fuels.
My worthy opponent, I don't believe this is true. No matter what you do, climate change is inevitable. If we change from fossil fuels to renewable energy will have some impact on the earth, one way or another. Next question. Small island states are prone to natural disaster and unpredictable weather conditions, which can negatively affect all forms of renewable energy. How then can you say it is feasible for small island developing states to solely depend on renewable energy?
My opponents, if you had done your research, you would have known that solar energy is something that can be stored in deep cycle batteries, which are way less cheaper than the lithium-ion batteries that we use today.
My worthy opponent, these batteries that you speak of are highly expensive. And furthermore, my worthy opponent, these batteries cannot be used for long durations of time. After 3 years, they would have to be disposed of and replaced. So how then can it be feasible considering the high cost?
The proposition cross-examiner.
My opponents, we are hearing talks about the Russians coming to Grenada to drill for oil. Don't you think that money could have been spent on harnessing some form of renewable energy?
My worthy opponent, the initial cost of drilling for fossil fuels is a lot cheaper than starting renewable energy plants. Think about it, my worthy opponent. We have to think about the fact that we would have to cut down on our precious trees. We'd still have to build expensive infrastructure, and then in the long run, we would still have maintenance costs.
We believe that if governments make it a priority to harness renewable energy, funds will become available. Your thoughts?
My worthy opponent, these funds that you refer to are not 100% all the time. Yes, there are a few instances where the funds may be 100%, but there are still pressure on the government as they would have to maintain it in the future. And think about it. These small island developing states that we think about have very low GDPs. They cannot afford to maintain such large projects.
That is why we need investors, my opponent.
My worthy
Moving
opponent,
on.
as I stated earlier.
Moving on. My opponent, so you are saying that it is not feasible, proper for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy?
My worthy opponent, according to my first speaker stated earlier, feasible as in possible and practical to achieve easily. My worthy opponent, is it really possible and practical to achieve easily sole dependence on renewable energy, as in depending on only renewable energy, no backup plans? For example, look at Dominica, look at Puerto Rico, sorry. If they would have had no backup plans, how do you think they would have survived this Hurricane Maria?
My opponents, it will take time. It is possible, but it can be done.
My worthy
opponents, we are saying that fossil fuels reserves will not last forever. Where are we going to get our energy from when these sources run out?
My worthy opponent, when these fossil fuels run out, yes, it is true that we may have to turn to renewable energy, but then would it still be feasible? We would turn to renewable energy because we have no other alternatives. We are not here to debate the advantages and disadvantages of renewable energy. However, we are here to debate whether sole dependence on renewable energy is feasible or not.
My opponents, but are we going to wait until these sources run out to address the matter? Is the sun going to harness the energy from it by itself? Opponents, I think not. Moving on. My opponent, it means that whether we like it or not, we will have to eventually resort to renewable energy sources. Why are you...
The opposition rebuttal speaker.
With the opponents, your team has spoken of renewable energy projects having funding, but the funding available is not enough. For Samoa, for example, of the $104 million that they obtained, 100 million of that was an ADB loan, an Asian Development Bank loan. This is not funding. This is a soft loan that can put small island developing states in huge debt. Secondly, your team has spoken of fossil fuels being finite or limited, but this does not mean that renewable energy is feasible. All this means is that it is a last resort that we must turn to. This does not mean it is feasible at all. You have also said that fossil fuels are a main factor in global warming and that renewable energy can help alleviate this problem. However, renewable energy, because of the small size of small island developing states, deforestation will have to take place to be able to implement all these plants for renewable energy that would take up so much space. This will cut down on the amount of energy, on the amount of carbon emission that will be taken in by these trees, which would help further global warming. Thank you.
The proposition rebuttal speaker.
I rise to refute my opponent's misleading arguments, while at the same time remove any shadows of doubt that may be casting darkness upon the brighter reality of this motion, leaving everyone here fully convinced that among small island states, renewable energy is the way to go. Your first speaker spoke about the costs associated with harnessing renewable energy being way out of our reach as small island states at this time. We accept that this is a costly venture, but as my first speaker noted, if there is acceptance that this is a priority, then funding will become more available to undertake this venture, which is the most fitting thing to do. Your second speaker talked about the hurricanes that have been devastating the Caribbean, but my opponents, our great use of fossil fuels is the reason for this. Your third speaker lamenting the lack of space to install the much-needed solar panels and wind turbines. But my worthy opponents, we are suggesting that with everything else, once we make it a priority, it will become a reality. There are lots of public and private buildings and infrastructures with vast amounts of roof space and crown lines available that can be used to house these solar panels and wind turbines. Opponents, in keeping with your school's motto, which in English speaks of virtue and knowledge, we urge you, therefore, to embrace all the knowledge we have shared with you today and accept that it is feasible, proper, and fitting for small island states to be solely dependent on renewable energy. I thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please tune in for the rest of Season 10 of the Grenlec Debates and visit us on our Facebook page to vote for your favorite debater.
The Grenlec Debates. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.